So it's very interesting to see the different perspectives in terms of how do we predict future, right? And this 9 to 5 or how the future of work is going to be, and to what Kailash was mentioning about the loyalties and how it is going to be, and to Vinay's point of multidisciplinary. So what I believe is going forward, there are going to be different strata of the ways in which the work happens is going to differ, and that's where to the other side of, the panelists, from Smita to Vimal, Shafiq, or of you were mentioning about how each of the industry sector and the way in which we are going to see work happening. And that's where, whether it's going to be 9 to 5, there would still be, I would say that whether it is startup, and even when we look up at the startups, right? Why did startups come? They have always been new businesses coming. Why do you call somebody a startup, right? So that is mainly because if there is, and that's exactly where, for example, the venture funding is happening, because that's where something completely different from the way things have been functioning when there is disruption, innovation, and that requires a specific set of support, specific way of working. That's where you call it as a startup. And this is where, fortunately or unfortunately, when the venture capital and the money flew in as well, not so much has been looked at the job creation or the way in which it is rendered and built, but there has been like two different ways in which a goal has been defined. But going forward also we'll see the same way. I mean, whether companies, the way in which we are going to transform, particularly in the next 10 years, is going to be a time of confusion and chaos. We would be inventing, reinventing. When you look at the COVID time and the pandemic time when everyone went back into work from home, companies didn't know, including us, didn't know how to tackle this, how to get work from people. And that's where I believe, as a startup, I can tell you in the stages we were, there were two sets we were struggling with. One, the innovative products which we were within the company itself that was going on. We were struggling with people not being there for a 9 to 5 or having a face-to-face conversation. That's where interdepartmental collaboration. These are some of the things that any stage technology cannot take off, is what I feel, because that's the whole human aspect which we were listening about from the panelists. An amazing way in which the perspective itself, and that's where the human aspect will not go off, and that's where still, whether it is a 9 to 5 or the timing is all about how much time you have overlap in terms of interacting with other people or other stakeholders with whom you have to come together to solve a problem. So in new companies there would be people who are going to collaborate, whether it's for a short-term, long-term gig or otherwise. People who are good, there'll be a set of people who are going to work towards a common goal, and that might most likely require, that core team most likely would require a set time where they're going to collaborate. And they would also be certain, once you have set patterns and set systems, processes, how things are going to interact, would be certain set which would require anywhere you can work from any time, but the goal is very fixed. Like what you have to give as an output is fixed. That need not necessarily be a 9 to 5 kind of job. And then you would still have, the people who are going to get the entire human element around it in terms of how cohesive that ecosystem is going to be. So I believe that, this brings me back to the book which I love the most, wherein, you have different planets, the Happy Prince, where you go and look at the different planets as such. So this is where you will have smaller, specific group of individuals, group of people who work towards tiny problems, or rather not big problems which are being solved in tiny goal-oriented fashion, and collaborating with multiple ecosystems. And that's exactly the reason why even today in companies, if you see that none of the employees are not coming, or rather the people who want to work also doesn't look at it as, there are people, especially from the younger generation, who just want to work for 6 months, 8 months and take a break, do whatever they love, feel like doing, and then come back and work again. But because of the skill, they reskill, they upskill. And when they come back, we also find it that during that point in time, it is really good to have a certain set of people. But can a company function with all of them being like that? No. There is still that core people who still solve for the problem. So I believe it's going to be a combination going forward. So 9 to 5 will still exist, whether it is 9 to 5, whether it's 10 to 5, or whether you choose to do it from a 12 to 4. Maybe, to Vimal's point also, we might become so efficient that what we used to do in 8 hours just gets done in 10 minutes, for example. That means you just have to collaborate for 3 hours instead of the 8-hour workday that we are seeing. So we'll see a combination of all of these. But one thing I don't believe is that it will ever go away completely, because whatever automation, whichever AR, VR, anything that we talk about, multiple universes we can create, that soft thing of human element will not go off, and which is the reason why the collaborating, which is where the decision which is not driven only by the artificial intelligence, because somebody has to train, somebody has to think ahead, somebody has to make those critical decisions, and that part is going to be the driver for the core, and that will still remain.
Why I ask specifically is that we do teach executive students, so those